Welcome back to Grassroots Media. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Terry's Flooring Sam Broyles Show, where we cover everything on the court with the Chuckey-Doak Black Knights basketball team. As always, I'm joined here with head coach Sam Broyles. Coach,
hey,
how are we doing today?
Doing good.
Doing well. It's not as cold outside as usually is about this time. It warmed up a little bit. Mile, was it cold last week?
2 more days. Give it a couple days.
I know.
They're going for snow again.
It's supposed to be like 60 degrees tomorrow, and then in two more days after that, we're back in the 30s and potentially out of school. You never know.
We will be sick.
Oh, yeah.
These kids especially.
There's been a sickness going around, too. I think about everybody I've talked to has at least caught something within the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, even our trainer, she's sick right now, so we're dealing, without her for a couple of days, hopefully. That's all.
I hope she gets better, too. Hopefully the team's healthy, too, because you're going into an important stretch of games here soon, of course, with Hampton and Happy Valley going into a couple conference games whenever you open up the season with them this week. But let's go through the games that we've had since the beginning of the year whenever we sat down. I think the only game that we had then was the first Hall of Champions game with Washburn, which you carried out a win in. And since then, you had another Hall of Champions game here at home against Hancock County. You had the Hardee's Classic at Crockett over Thanksgiving break, where you played Crockett, University High, and Providence. Then you had home games that started out with University High, North Green, and Cloudland. Picked up a win against Cloudland after losing a few straight there. But since we sat down and talked about the Washburn game, take me through the season so far and kind of some of the things that you'd like to adjust to and some of the things that you've seen your team grow out of.
Well, and, the Crockett game, we played Crockett well for 3 quarters. And people's wondering what's wrong with, trying to finish, that fourth quarter, how it gets, a little bit out of hand. Well, we started talking about the 25 turnovers. We had 3 straight games of 20-plus turnovers and at least 20-plus offensive rebounds that we give up. And where it's close for a while, it's not going to be like that.
Yeah.
How many extra possessions? 50. So 40 to 50 extra possessions every game. Even in the Cloudland game, we give up 20 or turned it over 20 times and 16 offensive boards. That's 36 extra possessions for Cloudland. You can't have that. UH, it was 23 and 21, in the Hardee's Classic. And it's just Providence was the 25 and 25. It's 50 extra possessions. So where those games were close for a while, we led in the third quarter of UH and Providence, just to see that, slip away and get out of hand. And it's because of the turnovers and offensive boards. We got to fix that if we want to be able to compete. We're in those games at the end.
And that's something we had talked about. I mean, the Providence game that I was there at, you had a lead in the second quarter. I can't remember if you got the lead back right after halftime or not.
We did. We actually went up by 5.
That's what I thought. I thought you had it right after halftime, and then it slowly slipped away after that. But if you fix those things, I think that's one of those things that I think you would tell everybody, too, that if you can fix some of those things going down the road, you'll be in a lot of ball games that people wouldn't expect you to be in at this point in time, because if you limit those offensive rebounds and turnovers, then that gives you a better shot to win those games, because that's minimizing the other team's opportunities to score too.
Well, you give a team 50 extra possessions. I mean, you're looking at 100 points to 150 counting the 3-point line. That's way too much. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to score that many, but that's still, they get that many more possessions than we do, and that's hard to compete. I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah.
It really is.
And I know coming out of the Thanksgiving tournament this year, of course, at Hardee's Classic, which we all have competed in for a few years in a row now. What did you learn from that week, too? Because the Thanksgiving Classics are always tough, because you never know what times you're playing until you finish the game prior to your next game. You don't know who you're playing until maybe after you play, or even when you go in and play, you think, well, we're going to play this team if we win or lose, but you can't think that way. So coming out of the Thanksgiving Classic this year, what did you learn about yourselves?
Right. You take that away, and we're a 500 ball club.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that has taught us a lot about the players we have. Ben Palazzo has really improved the UH game, and I think it's because of that tournament. The UH game at UH, he come out with 12 points. He, had 6 rebounds or more. That's what we got to have out of him. And he's been playing better with more confidence ever since then. He had a good night against Cloudland. So that was something that really came out of there. You see that Ryland and Dom and Gavin Crump's going to be able to score. Gavin had 22 again last night against Cloudland. He had that against Washburn. which we won that game. So we're finding out too, like Grant Bishop's coming off the bench so far, led us in rebounding against Cleveland. It's just stuff like that that I'm looking at, trying to look at the positives from that tournament. Yes, the boys, they don't like to lose. Who does? I don't.
Nobody.
But at the same time, it's helping them get better. And I know it's hard for them to see that right now. They're young and, no experience. We talked about this team being the first team to every position that I started someone in was for the first time at the high school level. And that's unheard of.
Yeah.
It really is.
And as you as a coach, too, I know I asked you what your team has learned. What have you learned about the team so far through this year, too? Because I think that's a kind of a theme we'll go throughout the season is it's such a new experience for you starting a brand new team this year. And how have you kind of adjusted to that period through your first 8 games of the season so far?
Well, trying to find their style.
Yeah.
Their style is so different than, teams of the past where we had the big 6'9". But at the same time, with Ben coming along, and he can give you that big guy, or Blake or Grant, they can give you that other post player. Then yes, your style's different, but at the same time, if those two can, get to where they can play the post positions for us, that opens up the guards to where they're not having to do, I talk about turnovers, and some of those guards that's having to handle it, their turnovers are high right now, but they're having to handle the ball every possession. Of course they're going to be higher.
Yeah.
And it's, first experience for them. And I told them that'll get better as the year goes on. It has to.
Yeah, it has to.
If we're going to compete.
But you ended up winning that Cloudland game, and that's the one win that we can talk about in that stretch. And it's one of those games like we talked about where you had limited the turnovers and the offensive rebounds a lot. And you got a great performance out of Crum, too. He had another 20-plus point game, which you had in the Washburn game, too. So that's kind of a trend so far this season. You picked up 2 wins, and in both of those wins, he scored 20-plus. So that's the bright thing that we could talk about this that's the bright spot that we could talk about in this interview is that game against Cloudland the other night. So
it is, and Dom had 15. He got back in the scoring column. People don't realize this. Ryland led us in assists.
I noticed that he was lower scoring in that game than he was his other games too. So
part of that lower assist and lower scoring was because he set out almost the entire first half. He got 2 fouls within the first 2 minutes of the first quarter. So he had to sit out for the majority of the first half, which, lowered it, of course. Grant Bishop had 7 rebounds. Ben Palazzo had 7 or 6. No, he had 6. But from where Ben started, 1 or 2, now he's starting to become aggressive, and he's getting after it. Blake, was more aggressive, and those boys have to become more aggressive because teams are going to take it to them. Mm-hmm. And they got to be able to withstand it. And when you go to Carter County, it is rough. It's just no different going to Unicoi.
Even teams like Unaka.
Now we got to go to Hampton.
Yeah, and that's an important matchup coming up.
I don't know about their floor. I've never played at the elementary or middle school, so I'm curious to see how big or small that floor is. The way they like to press, we have got to be ready for that. And it's hard to, with our floor being so big, our floor is a college floor, so you can spread people out more. It worries me about the size of the floor when we go up there.
That's something that'll be hard to adjust to also is because it's a new venue you play in now, of course, with the tragedy that struck that community up there in Hampton. So that'll be different to adjust to. But before we talk about it too much, of course, we need to get a break in from our sponsors. So stay tuned with us. After a few commercial breaks, we'll talk about that Hampton game and the other conference game that the Black Knights have coming up on their schedule right here in just a minute on Grassroots Media.
At Corner Pond, the friendly and knowledgeable staff has the experience necessary to help you out regardless the need. Have an item of value you'd like to pawn or sell? Corner Pond can help. They pawn numerous items of value, including firearms, tools, ammunition, silver, coins, and much more. When you walk through their doors, you'll find well-stocked shelves full of electronics, gaming systems, fishing and hunting equipment, car audio and accessories. And don't forget about the room full of guitars and basses and amplifiers, or their outside lawn and garden equipment. Corner Pond is a case knife dealer and carries numerous used knives as well. Stop by and let the friendly staff at Corner Pond help you today. at 432 East Bernard Avenue, Greenville, Tennessee.
Pizza Inn's new Right Way Buffet is open and ready for you and your family. Now with new garlic buttery crust and stuffed crust pizza, along with salads and desserts. It's the best part of your day. The all-day, everyday buffet. Only at Pizza Inn Greenville.
Welcome back to Grassroots Media. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Terry's Flooring Sam Broyles Show, where we cover everything on the court with the Chuckey-Doak Black Knights basketball team. As always, I'm joined here with head coach Sam Broyles. So, looking forward into the schedule this week, you could potentially say that this is one of the most important weeks of the season. Because even though you're only, I think this is your fourth week of the season now, you enter conference play and you've got 2 conference games this week. Now, your conference games, of course, bump up to 2 from previous years now after Hampton joined last year, so you've got 10 total now, but not often throughout the season are you going to get 2 conference games in the same week. This is one of those weeks, and you get a very tough draw traveling to Hampton for your first game, and then you finally come back home on Friday for that important home game against Happy Valley. So take me through both of these games this week and what you expect when you enter district play.
We forgot what it's like to play at home.
You really have.
It'll be eight straight, maybe.
Yeah, I think I'd looked at it. It's
and some long trips.
I think it's 20 days in between games because you played Hancock County on that Saturday. You were on the road at the Hardee's Classic that whole week. You were on the road all of last week, and then you take all the way to Friday to get home. 20 days between home games.
That was Saturday we played Cleveland. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. It's been a while, but you don't want to start out 0-2.
No.
How many teams, whether it's pros, college, whatever, when they start out 0-2 in conference, can battle back to, because you want to make the region. You want to be one of the top 4 teams. That's one of your goals, and it's hard to do that if you're 0-2 to start the season.
And I think another thing that people don't realize, too, is when you start 0-2, your percentage to finish at the top goes drastically down. Your percentage to get a better draw for that district tournament, which gives you that opportunity to go to the region tournament, gets tougher also. Because then if you lose those first 2, then you've got to battle back and you've got to steal some, because I think a lot of people before the season would probably expect South Green to win it again or be up there at the top. You still got them two times. West Green is a team I think people expect to be up there towards the top. You'd have them both times too still. So winning these games this week is very important because it would set you up to be in a higher seed going towards that district tournament that would allow you to enter the region tournament.
It would. You got to add Hampton to the teams you're talking about. And Johnson County, who knows about them?
That trip always to Johnson County is always one of the toughest games every year.
It's one of the toughest times that I can remember our conference. It's really competitive. And of course, it's being competitive. But it's going to be a battle, for our team. And they're ready for that challenge. Now, we've started out slow, but we know what we got to improve on. Turnovers, offensive boards, those are things you can fix. Fundamentals of a game.
Yeah.
Got to fix those first. So we start there to where we're in games. That gives you a chance. And the confidence, these boys, when they start developing confidence, they'll see a difference in winning and losing.
And then the Hampton game, of course, tomorrow night that we talked about, you're going to be playing at a different location than you're used to because it won't be at the high school now. It'll be at the middle school gym. So their floor potentially a little smaller. You don't know what it's like because probably never coached there, played there. So it's a brand new experience for you. It's a brand new experience for them. And I think that makes tomorrow night's game a little more tougher too because you're kind of going into a blind in a way.
You're right. Well, he knows things about that gym that we don't.
Yeah.
To his advantage. Well, of course. So it's going to be tough for us.
And even if you get film on them at their new gym too, it's tough to tell just from a few games this year. Because, you look at how many games they played at home, maybe just a handful, and then you got to try to figure out some of the tendencies that they have from that home court that they're playing on now. And it's going to be tough going into it. I know that's something that you'll probably point out to them later on in the week is like, hey, we're kind of going into this blind, or not later in the week, but tomorrow. Like, you're going into it blind. So it'll be an interesting trip when you go up there to Hampton, but you'll finally be happy to lay back and be able to play at home on Friday when you host Happy Valley. The Happy Valley game could be very important. It will be very important whether you win that game against Hampton or lose that game. If you lose, you got to be determined to win. If you win, of course, you want to make it 2-0 out of the week and then sit on the top of the standings after the first week of district action. Don't know a lot about Happy Valley either because I think their best player ended up transferring out. I know I think it was
Maybe to Science Hill.
I think so. And then I can't remember the name of their other player that was a real good shooter last year, but he graduated also.
Grindstaff.
Yeah, Grindstaff. I thought it was Grindstaff, but I wasn't sure. So you've got two of their best players who are gone now, so you're kind of getting a new team out of Happy Valley also. What do you expect in that game when you take on the Warriors?
That coach does a real job up there. They pressure you full court, man to man, so they're not going to let up. I'm sure that's how he'll play. He believes in that. That seems to be his philosophy. So they're going to get after us. And the same way with Hampton, we got to be able to handle the ball. Can't have 25 to 30 turnovers and expect to win either one of those games. You got to limit those. So we got to start there first. Take care of the basketball.
And it's a big week. I know this is one of the most important, but also one of the most exciting weeks of the season because district play is what you play for out of anything else. Of course, you have the non-conference games, but the conference is what matters most towards the postseason at the end of the year, and it starts tomorrow night against Hampton. But outside of basketball talk, we talked about it a little bit in the break right now, but yesterday, college football playoff was released. First 12-team bracket. Very interesting. Alabama gets left out. SMU gets in. A few teams, of course, getting seeded in different spots than people expected. Tennessee fans aren't happy they've got to go on the road to Ohio State. What are your first thoughts on it?
Most Tennessee fans like the part that Alabama didn't make it.
Yeah.
Sorry, shout out to Gene Ward in Alabama where they didn't make it. Coach Ward won't appreciate that. But
that's okay. They make it enough times. It's okay to take 1 year off. They'll be back next year.
That's true. But at the same time, Tennessee, I felt like they got the raw deal.
Mm-hmm.
They're better than a 9th seed. They deserved a home game. And not, if you do win that game, you got to turn around and play the number 1 undefeated team in the nation at Oregon. Can you imagine?
It's a hard – they probably got the hardest draw. I think I will confidently say that Tennessee got the hardest draw out of any team in the playoffs, and it's going to be interesting. You look at the first round of games. If you got the time, I'd like to go through and see your predictions on them and see who you've got going through each game. You've got Texas and Clemson going up first in Austin. Who do you think takes that game?
I think Texas will, even though I like Dabo.
Yeah, I like Dabo too. I'm a Texas fan as you see the shirt, but Clemson's a tough team to play. That's a team that they've got experience of winning it all. They were the first 15-0 national champions. And
how did Texas not beat Georgia, though?
That's a good question. Self-inflicted
penalties. Especially back out.
Yep. Self-inflicted penalties, no run game, not many adjustments, just tough game overall. But I would argue that even without winning the championship, Texas got kind of an easier draw now because Clemson is a tough team, but you do get the only 3-loss team that's ever made the playoffs in your first game, and then you go into the second round against Arizona State, which is, I think, the second lowest seed out of the bracket. So you get the 2 lowest seeds in the bracket if you win that first game. So they got a relatively easy side all the way to the semifinals if they can win.
Boise State, how good are they?
Yeah, that's a question that we're yet to know.
Who have they played?
The only, I think, really tough team they played was Oregon. It was a 3-point loss, and that's their only loss of the year. So it's a good game to kind of go off of, but at the same time, that's only 1 game. So that could have been their best game that they played all year, and they lose by 3. So same with SMU. I mean, they've had a few good games this year, but
for a half they looked terrible, but then you saw the second half.
Yep, and I think that saved them going in.
Yeah, it did.
It did for sure. And then outside of Texas and Clemson below that, you've got Tennessee and Ohio State. Who do you think takes that one?
I hope Tennessee,
yeah.
But it's at Ohio State, which I don't think's right.
It's going to be tough to play in Columbus.
It really is.
So you taking Ohio State in that one?
Tennessee on the upset there.
Tennessee on the upset. I hear a lot of that. So it'll be interesting come the 20th when they play. Below that, you've got SMU and Penn State. This is one I hear a lot of differentiating on.
I think Penn State.
You think Penn State's going to take it? I think it's a big game for James Franklin, so I would not be surprised to see Penn State for that one.
They played Oregon well.
They did. Played Oregon well. They played Ohio State all right.
They got down too much early. Battled back, kind of like SMU did. Who was the next team you said?
I think after that it was the Battle of Indiana, Notre Dame and Indiana, in-state game.
Notre Dame may make it all the way.
They are very good.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me a bit. Now, I have watched them play.
Notre Dame's a very good team.
And the one game I watched Indiana, they looked, did not look good at all.
Ohio State game.
Yeah.
Yeah, didn't look good in that one.
Yeah.
So let's go back up to the top. You've got Texas and Arizona State. Who takes that one and goes to the semifinals?
Oh, Texas.
Texas. And who will they meet, Oregon or Tennessee?
Afraid it'll be Oregon.
Oregon. So then you go down and you've got Boise State and Penn State. Very intriguing matchup.
Kidding me. See, your semifinal on the other side is twice as hard as, the other one. But Boise State and who? Penn State?
Mm-hmm.
I would say Penn State.
Penn State to the
They're
semifinals.
not going to beat Georgia, but
And then Georgia and Notre Dame. Who do you think takes that one?
Georgia and Notre Dame, I think Georgia.
I think Georgia, but I think that's one game I would not be surprised if Notre Dame
Yeah,
wins.
I mean, it's very possible.
Very possible for sure. And then in the championship game, you've got Texas and Oregon up top, and then Penn State and Georgia down below. Who do you think makes it to the championship?
I think Oregon most definitely will be in. Oregon and Georgia.
Oregon and Georgia, I believe that's who I had in it too. And who you have taken it all?
I hope Oregon.
I hope Oregon too.
Yeah, but Kirby's been pretty tough.
I picked Georgia also, and the reason
You
that I
got
did.
Saban, who's no longer there, and
Yep.
guess who was just starting to be just as good as Saban was, and that's Kirby. So
And the reason I have Georgia winning too is the SEC championship was in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. It's the same
Is that
spot
where
the
it's at
championship game is. So you've got
Yeah,
a
let's go
home
with
field
Georgia.
advantage there, which I think Georgia's campus is only 45 minutes to an hour away, and their fans travel well. So, and then you've got Oregon fans who would have to travel across the country. So if Georgia does make it, it'll be a home field advantage for them. So that's who I had taking it all.
over Texas,
Yep. I have
your team.
It's my team, but I have Oregon beating Texas.
Of course, I got UT losing. So
Yeah, I've got Oregon beating Texas because Texas has had two tough games this year. They've both been against Georgia. They've played behind in both games. Really didn't respond well, and Oregon's one of those teams that they've not trailed a lot this year either, but they like to come out and punch teams in the mouth. I think if Oregon comes out and does that, Texas has a hard time responding. Oregon probably runs away with it.
Can Oregon handle Georgia's physicality?
That's one thing we've got to see too. That'll be a good
Because
storyline.
Texas struggled with that,
Yep.
especially the first time.
Yep,
They
Texas
absolutely
struggled in both
bad.
halves of this game too.
Yeah. So
And that's a storyline.
Georgia's been there.
And that's a storyline too. Is Carson Beck's probably out of the playoffs, so now you've got Garrett Stockton, who was the backup that led them to the championship. So
So he is out.
I think
hadn't
he's
heard
out. I
that.
think he hurt his UCL, which is usually a major injury in baseball. Don't know how. Of course, it was his throwing arm too, so that probably indicates that he's going to be out for a while. I don't know if they said it was torn or if it was strained, but I did hear it was a UCL injury. So I would
Florida
expect
State went through the same thing last year and didn't even make it.
it's crazy.
You need to ask Coach Donahue about
I
Florida
will.
State.
That's what I'll do this week.
That's his team.
We'll see what his predictions are, and I'll say, you know what? If Florida State was in there, wouldn't they be winning it all?
Because he thinks that Georgia shouldn't have made it because of that. And, he's got a point.
Yeah.
Now people's picking Georgia. If Beck doesn't play, I don't know if you can pick them and make it to the finals, can you?
I don't either.
Are you still going to stick with that pick?
If Beck is there, probably not. If Beck is at quarterback, I think I might take the Notre Dame upset.
I believe you're right.
But that backup played really well yesterday. That'll be a good storyline. Does he continue to play that well? Because we only seen him for one half of football against Texas, where I think he was told in the locker room, like, hey, you've got to go out there and be our hero. Can he be the hero for 3 games and lead them to a championship? That's
The
gonna be
problem is
interesting.
the teams will be able to scout him now,
Yeah, that's true.
where they wouldn't have, I'm sure they didn't.
Yeah, that hurt a lot too because Texas really didn't know what to expect out of a backup. That's something you don't prepare for.
No. And it showed.
Yep. But I'm excited. The crazy part is it's another month and a half before we find out who wins the championship too. January 20th, I
Long wait.
believe, is the championship game. Yeah. So it'll be a while before we revisit this, but we'll revisit it every week. It'll be 2 weeks before we get the first round of games. But hopefully the next time we sit down, we get to talk about 2 conference wins for the Black Knights over Hampton
That
and Happy
would be
Valley.
nice.
That would be awesome. But, Coach, that's all I've got for you this week.
Yeah,
Once
thank
again,
you.
appreciate you sitting down with me. Thank you all for watching this week's edition of the Terry's Flooring Sam Broyles Show. We look forward to seeing you next time here on Grassroots Media.